And there you have it, the Midwestern stereotype in a 5-second clip. For this video right here, we'll be going through the Hoosier Redneck Riviera. There'll be 2 different towns in this video, those towns being Scottsburg and Austin. Both places have similar reputations, and both are small towns in Scott County. There's only about 25,000 people in Scott County. Scottsburg is about 30 minutes north from downtown Louisville, while Austin is about 5 minutes further north along I-65. We're going to speed things up like a hill jack on Mountain Dew, and just like that, we're in Scottsburg. Now, I'll start by saying that some of this might be a little bit PG-13, but I mean, it's some real stuff that has happened here. There's been a lot of drama in Scottsburg and the town north of here in Austin in recent years. There has been a lot of slander that has been said about both towns, and I'm going to give an example. It's going to be a little bit PG-13. But anyway, I'll start by saying that I feel for people from both Scottsburg and Austin because a lot of Hoosiers give both of these towns a hard time. If you're from Indiana, it's likely that you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not from Indiana, I have a great example for you, as back in 2020, then Indianapolis sports talk show host Dan Dakich went on his radio show and blasted the school for firing their basketball coach. Now, I have no idea if he was a good coach or a bad coach, if the program was winning or losing. You know, I stopped paying attention to Indiana high school basketball when I was, in high school in Indiana. I graduated in 2010, and I can't say that I ever paid attention to Scottsburg, Indiana high school basketball. Anyway, with that said, I'm just being a messenger here, as back in 2020, Dakich went on his radio show on the top-rated sports station in Indianapolis and said, "Man, it's amazing to me what idiots live in Scottsburg, Indiana. You towns down there, you are full of meth and AIDS and needles, and we should just annex them and get rid of all of them." Now, Dakich is someone who has had a very successful career in sports media. He was a player for IU basketball, and everyone from the state of Indiana knows about the cult following for IU basketball. Anyway, Dakich has had success in media. He has called a lot of Big Ten games for ESPN over the years, so he's a pretty high-up figure. So for him to say stuff like this was just kind of dumb. I mean, he hurt his brand big time by going on this rant, but Dakich is known for saying some polarizing things. Anyway, Dakich continued to tell listeners to drive down to Scottsburg and to take a number 2. He also said that he might just drive down there himself and beat the hell out of every school board member. He called one of the players a meth head, saying that a certain kid didn't get to play in a game or something because he got his hands on some drugs and his dad was on the school board or something, so he wasn't happy about his kid not playing in the game. I'm not claiming to know what triggered Dakich on this rant, but that's the best of what I could gather. That's what I could come up with on what triggered Dakich to want to go on this rant. Anyway, I'll get more into the meth and needles and AIDS thing later in this video, as unfortunately there is some history there for Scottsburg and Austin, and it's something we'll talk about later in the video. And speaking of Scottsburg High School, we just passed it. The athletic teams go by the Warriors. Now, back to the story, as Dakich, who for a long time was a host on Indianapolis's highest-rated sports talk radio station, should have been more professional and never should have gone on that rant in the first place. And I feel like if he had a time machine, he would go back and never say what he said. However, the point that I want to make has less to do with Dan Dakich and more to do with the reputation that not only Scottsburg has, but the town of Austin as well. Now, in my opinion, I feel justified by saying what I'm about to say. You know, having lived in multiple places throughout rural southern Indiana for a 6-year or so stretch, I feel justified by saying what I'm about to say. That's right, I earned it. I earned the right to have an opinion about southern Indiana. I lived through it. I survived. I can say what I want to say. And what I'm going to say about southern Indiana is that all of you towns, everyone who lives in a town in southern Indiana, all of southern Indiana is Scottsburg. That's right. Do you live in Seymour? Do you live in North Vernon? Do you live in Greensburg? Do you live in Salem or Washington? Yeah, you guys are Scottsburg too. Seeing people who live in other towns throughout southern Indiana diss Scottsburg and Austin is like the pot calling the kettle black. It's like seeing the insecure bully at school who wants someone to pick on so that they can feel better about themselves. I mean, come on, rural Indiana, you're not fooling anyone. Everyone knows that all of you southern Indiana folks think that duct tape fixes everything. A lot of what people from these other towns in Indiana say, especially people from towns that are nearby like North Vernon, Seymour, Columbus, Madison, Sellersburg, and dozens of other towns, a lot of these towns have the same redneck feel and culture as what you will see in both Scottsburg and Austin. Now, the redneck culture in some of those other towns might not be as strongly present as it is in Scottsburg and Austin. I mean, let's be real, Scottsburg and Austin set the bar of being hilljack extremely high. But my point is that every single city and town in the state of Indiana has a redneck culture that's a part of their identity. Every single city and town. Except Gary. That place is just hood. But anyway, for example, it's kind of hypocritical for someone from Salem to ask someone from Scottsburg if they can play the Star-Spangled Banner on their turkey call. Because let me tell you this, I have some inside information. I know some people from the area. I do. And I bet you didn't know this. The school choir at Salem Elementary actually puts on a performance every year just before winter break, and the entire concert is actually students playing songs on their turkey calls. Now that I've said that, I might get the flannel shirt wearing brigade of the Salem Lions Club after me for that one, because that's something that they don't want outsiders to know about. They wanted to keep that a secret, but that's okay. I'll keep on keeping on. I'll be good. I'm fine with being hated in that one town. I would say that I would kiss and make up, but I don't want herpes. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that offensive? I swear, I have nothing against you if you're from Salem. Nothing against that town at all, or any town. Really, nothing personal against any town. I was just picking on Salem as an example there, but you see what I mean? People from all around southern Indiana rip on Scottsburg and Austin and say things just like that on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't feel nice, does it? It doesn't feel nice to be randomly made fun of like everyone does with these two towns. So if you're from a town in a neighboring county and you've ripped on Scottsburg and Austin while neither of these towns have ever done anything to you, yeah, you just got a taste of your own medicine there. Yeah, that's right. You better head to the pharmacy because I just prescribed medicine to not only Salem, but to all of southern Indiana for that matter. You might want to send your prescription to the butt drugs in Corydon. Side effects might include a come-to-Jesus moment after looking in the mirror. Well, I'll let you reflect on that while I let out my inner hilljack and go fight someone over the last case of Mountain Dew at Walmart. I'll be right back. Well, wouldn't you know it, they were out of Mountain Dew. It's a product in high demand in this here region, I tell ya. Well, moving on now, a common name that people refer to this place as is Scott-Tucky. That's such a funny name, right? Yeah, if you're in junior high. Some people here think they're so funny when they say that they start feeling themselves and they'll start thinking that they're the next up-and-coming comedian on social media. They'll then post a status of checking into Scott-Tucky on their personal Facebook page and get no reaction whatsoever. Then quickly for them, it's back to reality because they're really just not that funny. Well, truth is, though, you can find a variation of that nickname everywhere, even in other nearby towns. So if you live in Indiana and you think that calling Scottsburg Scott-Tucky is hilarious, well, you're a hypocrite because, one, if you're in southern Indiana, you're likely only a half hour away from Kentucky, and two, one could most likely say that about the city or town that you live in and have it be just as true. Or if not, at least it would be true to an extent. Before we move on, can we take a moment to talk about just how freaking tall some of these signs are? I mean, seriously, how tall does a sign have to be? I get it if it's for a gas station along the interstate so that way drivers can see the price of gas in time to be able to make a safe merge and exit if that's what they want to do, but along the main drag here? Really? It just looks really odd. Like, is there some kind of competition among the store owners in town to see who can have the tallest sign or something? It's just, every time I've been in Scottsburg, I could never help but notice just how tall the signs are for the fast food joints along this main drag right here. But back on track really as You shouldn't be calling Scottsburg Scott-tucky. Rather, you should be calling the state of Indiana Indy-tucky. I kid. But anyway, it's pretty easy to just take out the last syllable of the name of a city or a town and replace it with Tucky. Whether it's Crother-tucky, Bed-tucky, C-tucky, Mad-tucky, Connor-tucky, Evan-tucky, Moore-tucky, Martin-tucky. See? It's pretty easy. Not original at all either. You can find the same type of nickname being given to towns in every other state. That is, of course, every state that's not named Kentucky. Cities in Kentucky already have to say that they're in Kentucky, so the joke's already there. However, I live in Michigan these days, and for example, I can think of 10 cities near me that people slap Tucky onto the end of the name. So yeah, don't worry, Scottsburg. You're not alone in being mocked by the majority of people adding Tucky at the end of your name when referring to your city. I've got your back. That's right, Scottsburg. I'm your man. You can elect me for your next mayor. I'll just run the city remotely from out of state. That's what everyone does nowadays anyway, right? Work remotely. So that's what I'll do. Well, we're now getting into the hustle and bustle of downtown Scottsburg. As you can see, it's a very busy city. It's a very congested area. You have your mass transit line even, as you can hop on the train and take it to Louisville. It's free too. You just have to be really careful when you hop on the train. Actually, yeah, I wouldn't do that at all. You'll probably get hurt. Anyway, there's another story that I want to share about Scottsburg, and that is that there was once another kid from the junior high school that I went to in Columbus that would go to Scottsburg often. This would have been like 2004 or 2005 now. I don't know why he came here a lot. Maybe his parents were divorced and one of them ended up living down here or something, but I had just moved to good old boy Indiana at the time from good old boy Kansas. This was in the 7th grade, and this was the first time that I've ever heard about Scottsburg. I just remember kids making all kinds of redneck jokes about this particular dude, often going to Scottsburg for the weekend. Now, this was during the peak of the Larry the Cable Guy and Jeff Foxworthy fame and glory, so you can basically just steal all of their jokes about Walmart and replace the noun of Walmart with Scottsburg, and that's what all the kids would say. So yes, Scottsburg has always had the reputation of being a redneck town. You know, they would say things like, "You might be a redneck if you visit Scottsburg every weekend." Or, "Oh, you visited Scottsburg, eh? Did you make sure to go to that there fireworks stand? You know, I hear that there's no Mountain Dew left at any of the stores here in Scottsburg. There's plenty of Smart Water, though. Nobody in this town can sell one of those here to save their life. You know, people in this town believe that filling up their pickup at the Walmart gas station doubles the value of their vehicle. And hey, did you know why there are no good therapists in southern Indiana? Because instead of paying for therapy, people can just go down to Scottsburg and people watch." Yeah, people from Scottsburg and Austin, for that matter, have heard it all. None of this is funny to them. Scottsburg residents are like Peyton Manning reading an NFL defense in year 18. That's right, these people have seen it all. The only slight difference, of course, is that nobody from Scottsburg is an NFL quarterback. Yeah, actually, Scottsburg residents are not like Peyton Manning at all. Sorry, Peyton, and sorry, Scottsburg, I'm just trying to stick up for you there, but I think I might have done the opposite, because nobody believes that. All right, well, moving on. All right, yes, absolutely, moving on. Anyway, there's really only so much that one can do to defend Scottsburg at times, because if you stick around long enough with your redneck bingo card, you might be able to come across the redneck trifecta. What is the redneck trifecta, you ask? Oh, well, it's a pickup truck with a Confederate flag and a Monster Energy drink decal, with the trifecta being completed with truck nuts on the trailer hitch. These days, it's usually found on early 2000 model small to mid-size pickups. Yeah, I feel like you don't see it around as much as you used to around here. As I feel like I used to see this pretty much any time I left the house when I lived around here about 10 to 20 years ago. However, you'll still see them every now and then. You'll see a pickup truck with 2 out of the 3 more often than the trifecta anymore. Usually, it's the duo of the Confederate flag and the Monster logo. Or maybe the Monster logo and the truck nuts, but you rarely see all 3 anymore. And I don't believe I came across either a duo or a trifecta in this video. You can let me know if I missed it. Well, moving on now, as Scottsburg has such a reputation for being Hilljack Central that a radio station called US 1049 in Davenport, Iowa, which is 400 miles northwest from Scottsburg, listed Scottsburg as one of the top 10 most redneck cities in the entire country. However, they happened to use this photo for Scottsburg. I mean, really, US 1049? Was it really that hard to find a photo to use of a cornfield or a Dollar General or something? You can do better than that. Really? You're gonna be that lazy? The photo that was used for this post looks like it was from some kind of ranch out of New Mexico. I tell you what, you might be a redneck if you work at 1049 in Davenport, Iowa, and use a photo of desert mountains when trying to illustrate Scottsburg, Indiana. They need to get rid of the Mountain Dew vending machine in the lunchroom over there at the studios of US 1049 in Davenport, Iowa, because duct tape won't fix that error. No, sir. Duct tape very well might be able to fix this error, though. Yes, Pat Sajak, I'd like to buy a U, please. Are there any U's? I mean, for real, a V being used instead of a U in the word public above the entrance to the town public library? Yeah, that's a cheap and easy fix, City of Scottsburg. You're not doing yourselves any favors there. Might as well put some duct tape over that until you can gather up the funds for a nice, shiny new letter. I mean, can you believe that a library would use a V instead of a U? Only in Scottsburg, Indiana, right? The redneck capital of the United States, where they can't even spell public right on their public library building. Well, if you don't know why there's a V there instead of a U, the joke is on you. You as in Y-O-U. That's right, not as in V as in Y-O-U. Ha, I bet you weren't expecting that one now, were you? There's actually quite a few city libraries that have a V instead of a U, and if you didn't know that, you might be a redneck. Just kidding, not really. But the reason why there is a V instead of a U is because it's actually paying tribute to history. And like I said, you can find this on many libraries throughout the country. The original Latin alphabet had only 23 letters, and the one that we have today has 26. Back in the Latin days, a V would be used as both a V and a U. Make sure to drop a like for that amazing insight. All right, so what do we have here? It's a cornstalk art piece on the left, and it's a tagged pickup truck on the right. Yeah, that's a Dodge, by the way, if you couldn't tell without the extra spray paint. Now, that was a little bit of a redneck sequence. No way of denying that. Meanwhile, the Urban Dictionary definition for Scottsburg is ruthless. I'm not even going to read that out loud. That's just mean. Although, it looks like the definition of Scottsburg was filled out by someone from Scottsburg. They misspelled some words here and there, and it wasn't a thing where they were trying to use the Latin version of you in a word that has the letter U. No, they just misspelled the word that. Either they were trying to spell that, or they were trying to say twat, because that's probably what this person is a twat. But anyway, in the definition, they say that there's a sign in town that says, all roads lead back to Scottsburg. And they say that it's a joke to us. They used the word us. So whoever wrote this is most definitely ripping on their own hometown. Someone named KAJD semicolon LSJF Haley Beck with LKJAF back on January 2nd, 2011, nearly 13 years ago. So yeah, even more proof that Scottsburg has had this bad reputation about it for a long time. Yeah, that's usually how it goes with all of these rural towns across the Midwest. People will rip on their town all day, every day, and complain about how there's nothing to do other than go play Walmart tag or go do drugs. And that's the excuse that nearly every small rural town with a drug problem goes to. They'll say that the town is depressing and that there's nothing else to do. Another excuse that people will say, not only from Scottsburg, but from any rural Midwestern town with a drug abuse problem, will say that they're located right off of a major thoroughfare, whether it's I-65 or dinky little Indiana State Route 135, whatever the thoroughfare is, they'll say that it's a major drug trafficking route. But drugs, unfortunately, are bad across the entire rural Midwest, whether you're a town off I-65 or you're out in the hills off of some windy state highway. And actually, it's not just the Midwest, it's the entire country. It's an unwinnable battle with heroin, meth, crack, cocaine, and fentanyl. Unfortunately so. Man, we're 20 minutes into this video and I haven't even talked about the history of this town as I usually do. in the usual city and town video that I make. And there's even more drama to mention with the AIDS epidemic that happened here in 2015, but I'll talk more about that once we get to Austin. Well, anyway, Scottsburg was platted in 1871 and was named after the general superintendent of the Jeffersonville, Madison, and Indianapolis Railroad, General Horace Scott. The entire original town that was platted out is now the Scottsburg Historic District, and I'm sure you saw some of those historic district markers when we were driving around downtown. The only thing of historical significance that I could find really was Pigeon Roost State Park, which is 5 miles south of modern-day Scottsburg. And down there, there's a site of an old battleground between the Indians and the British from the 1800s. Otherwise, there really isn't much to say about the history timeline of Scottsburg that differentiates itself from other similar-sized communities. When it comes to the economic stats, Scottsburg isn't really all that impressive in that category either. There's not much hope for a long career path for any of the new high school grads unless they want to be the next manager at Motel 6 off of the 65 exit, or the Burger King or the Taco Bell. You know, Scottsburg is the type of town where the ones who are able to escape once they graduate high school make a direct beeline either way down 65 in their crappy car until they see economic opportunity for their future. I mean, I'm not being mean, but the person who filled out the Urban Dictionary definition for the town said so herself, so it must be true, right? Also, I've lived in southern Indiana towns like I've mentioned throughout this video, so I know it's true. The latest population estimate for Scottsburg is 7,300, and the median household income is extremely low, only $32,000 per year. That's the same median household income that we see for many of the country's most poverty-stricken areas and regions. No economic opportunity whatsoever, no way to advance your professional career at all unless you're satisfied with employment at retail or fast food chains. I can't emphasize that enough. Only 12.7% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and I don't know if I've ever made a video on a city or a town so far that has had a lower number than that for college graduates of people aged 25 and over. The median value of an owner-occupied home is under $100,000, and the poverty rate is 19%. I'm surprised it's not in the 20% range given the other numbers that we see, so that's a win for Scottsburg right there. Right next to those numbers for Scottsburg, however, are those for Scott County as a whole, and you can see that the numbers for Scott County ain't much better than those for Scottsburg. And now we're out of the city of Scottsburg officially, and we'll be in Austin in no time. Anyway, the last thing to mention about Scottsburg would be the crime rate, and really it's not all that bad. Both the violent and property crime rates for Scottsburg are slightly below average. But you know, I might not be wrong if I said that all of the crime that is committed in not only Scottsburg, but for all of Scott County, was drug-related. The person committing the violent offense was probably on drugs at the time, and the person stealing crap was probably on drugs too. I might not be wrong if I said that all of the crime committed was from people who were on drugs. Alright, so now we're in Austin, which will complete our tour of Indiana's Redneck Riviera. And unlike with how I went about things for Scottsburg, I'll first mention the history of Austin, as there's actually some interesting things to point out here. Austin was originally developed as a railroad town. In 1899, Morgan Foods began in Austin, and you'll see the large warehouse for it further up along US Highway 31. The company was named after the first family to settle in the area, as they came here from Bourbon County, Kentucky, of all places. To the right, we just passed by Austin High School, home of the Eagles. Now, other history to mention about Austin is what the place was like during World War II, as during this time, in order to stay in business during a sluggish economic era, Morgan Foods signed a contract with the government to provide the U.S. military with food. During this time, most of the working residents in Austin worked at Morgan Foods. There is also a place here called Camp Austin, which was a prisoner of war camp. Some of the prisoners of war also worked at the Morgan Foods factory. They say that as many as 1,500 German and Italian prisoners of war were stationed in Austin, while the camp was located just north of the Morgan Foods warehouse. So you could say that Austin was most definitely a company town. Well, on to the elephant in the room now, as back in 2015, Austin put itself on the map with a historic AIDS outbreak. Scottsburg saw some of it too. However, Austin, being a town of only 4,000 people, saw over 200 HIV cases in a year's worth of time. Some health experts at the time called it the worst drug-fueled HIV outbreak to ever hit rural America. That's right. The spread of HIV in Austin was done through drug addicts sharing contaminated needles with each other. Things were so bad that the community was forced to have an official needle exchange center so that drug users would stop using dirty needles. So it was basically assistance for people to continue to abuse illegal drugs. It actually makes sense, though, because as a community, that's the least that you could do to try to stop the spread of AIDS. Just realizing that drug addicts have a severe mental problem that, each individual is dealing with, and they are drug addicts, so they are going to crave drugs, and they're going to do whatever it takes to be able to put that drug into their system, whether it's using a clean needle or a contaminated needle. They're just going to do it. So you might as well give clean needles to that portion of the community so at least there wouldn't be an AIDS outbreak. So yeah, that actually makes sense. The town got a lot of heat for that just because of the fact that they needed to have one. They got mocked by the state and other neighboring communities and nationally too, because this was a national story. But step one of putting the HIV outbreak to bed was to be able to provide the community with clean needles. That's the truth. Now, in order to come up with a proper solution for the problem, you have to understand how it happened. Austin is a poverty-stricken rural town that's been taken over by the opioid epidemic. Those are the facts. With that said, drugs are frowned upon greatly by a large portion of the local society. Rightfully so, but some residents who have obtained HIV went on interviews with national news organizations that came to town back in 2015 and said that stores would not sell clean needles to them because they could see marks on their arms where they would stick themselves. Now, the state of Indiana is a very backwards thinking state. It always has been, and it most likely always will be. It depends on how democratic the city of Indianapolis gets. But the thinking on the state of Indiana's part, along with other similar mindsets from people in power in these rural communities, was that not allowing people to purchase clean needles from the stores would encourage them to not use drugs, because if they didn't have a needle to shoot up heroin with, so to speak, then they wouldn't have that option available to them, right?
Nope.
Wrong. Look, you have to realize that these are drug addicts that you're dealing with, so that means that they're addicted to opioids. Some of them are going to do whatever it takes to satisfy what their body is craving, and if that means sharing a dirty and contaminated needle with others because that's all of what's available to them, then that's what they're going to do. Experts say that the state of Indiana acted too late in giving resources to Scott County to put an end to this crisis, because by the time that they stepped in, the damage had already been done. But experts say that the state of Indiana could have limited the HIV cases to maybe 56 in this community rather than 215 or whatever the number was exactly. Well, I'll have some final thoughts about Scottsburg and Austin in a minute, but it's time to wrap this thing up. You can't always trust the job market in Scott County, Indiana, and you can't always trust someone who still believes in Santa, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. Well, since we're running out of time, I'll do this for both Austin and Scottsburg simultaneously. The education in both towns is poor. The high schools in both towns score well below average in math, science, and reading, and over half of the students at both schools are labeled as economically disadvantaged. Austin scores slightly lower than Scottsburg in this category. Crime is not an issue in either town. The biggest crimes that are done here are crimes that people do to themselves with becoming addicted to drugs. Crime gets a slightly better score for Austin than it does for Scottsburg. The downtown area of Scottsburg is noticeably better than the one for Austin. However, both are underwhelming. The next category is economic opportunity, and I've got to be honest with you, I'm not sure if you guys have noticed this with people in general, but not everyone is satisfied with being paid $15 an hour to be a manager at Dairy Queen. Needless to say, both towns have an extremely poor economic outlook. Scottsburg gets a slightly better score because it would be a closer commute to Louisville and you have more things in town, to be quite honest with you. Recreational opportunities are limited in the area. There's some nice hiking trails and some hilly areas nearby, but those are about a 10-minute drive from town, and there's not much else here at all. It gets a 4 out of 20 for both towns. Now, I've got to say, I was more impressed with the history of Austin than I was for that of Scottsburg. Slight edge to Austin there. Scottsburg undoubtedly has more amenities than what Austin has, although it's not much at all, and the last category is cost of living, in which both towns get a 20 out of 20, as housing prices are dirt cheap in both towns. Overall, the Chris Livability score for Scottsburg, Indiana is 68 out of 160, while the score for Austin is 60 out of 160, placing both towns towards the bottom of the list of the 20 places that I've done a Chris Livability score for so far. Well, final thoughts here, and I know that I've shared a lot of opinions about the place already, but just to recap, the people who mock these towns the most are people from other areas of Indiana, southern Indiana to be specific, so neighboring counties like Clark County, Jefferson County, Jennings County, Decatur County, Bartholomew County, Jackson County, Ripley County. Look, I'm just saying that if you're someone who mocks Scottsburg and Austin and you're in one of those neighboring counties, yeah, your communities are not that much better than Scottsburg and Austin are. In fact, the opioid epidemic has affected your towns just as much as they have the towns that you saw in this video. Also, if you're in a town in a neighboring county, you're just as redneck. I mean, people end up meeting their significant others at yard sales all the time, not just in Scottsburg and Austin, but throughout all of southern Indiana. The only idea that any group of dudes can ever come up with for a hangout on a Friday night is to drive an hour away to a Hooters in either South Indy or Clarksville. I mean, I bet a lot of you didn't know this, that a lot of high schools here in southern Indiana have childcare provided during high school prom. People in this area will invest more money on their trucks than they will their own homes. They'll need an entire bathroom remodel that they've been holding back on for weeks or months, but the minute that they see a new lift kit that they want, they'll max out their credit cards. Look, I kid about a lot of this, but also not really. The redneck culture is live and well in all of Indiana, and I'm just telling other Indiana residents to look in the mirror before they take shots at Scottsburg and Austin, because if you're in Indiana, specifically southern Indiana, your communities are also Scottsburg and Austin. The HIV outbreak that happened in Austin could have very well have happened to a different community nearby, and it might happen to another community nearby in the future. Austin just happened to be the place where it happened first, and Austin was made as an example, so now state authorities are more careful in trying to prevent this from happening again. But like I said, it could have very well have happened in Seymour, it could have very well have happened in North Vernon, it could have very well have happened in Versailles, it could have very well have happened in Madison, it could have happened anywhere. And instead of Scottsburg and Austin having the negative light on them, it could have been on your communities instead. Well, with that said, I do end the video here. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also make sure to hit that notification bell and select yes, so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you saw here can be found in my Indiana playlist or in my USA Small Towns playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. We'll see you next time. Peace.